Hey, everybody, welcome back. We are so excited to be here today. And the three women of wisdom, we're going to talk about generational mistakes. Things that get passed down from generation to generation to generation to generation. And I wholly believe that they get passed down because we don't know what to do with it. We don't know that it can be changed. There's no challenge. We don't ever question whatever that mistake is. And we just repeat it. And then our kids repeat it and their kids. And until finally somebody goes, wait a minute, I think something could be different. Right. And usually this is, we're typically talking about behaviors, right? Generational mistakes are typically behavior related, but they can also just be simply like beliefs, right? Like the belief you have about money, for example, can be a very generational thing about, how my dad thought about money is totally how I thought about money until I was like, I don't really actually have to think about money this way. I don't have to think that it's hard, that you got to hold on to it, that it doesn't come freely, you got to work like a dog for it. Like, I don't have to actually believe those things if I don't want to, right? But it's having the ability to look at the things that are happening in your life and then deciding whether or not you want to keep them or whether or not something could be different, especially if there's discomfort and pain around any of it, around any of the behaviors. So this actually became really prevalent for me. I remember when I was a teenager and I had a girlfriend come and spend the weekend with myself and my family. And at the end of the weekend, she said to me, "Is this how you guys are all the time?" And I didn't really understand her question. I thought, what is she talking about? I said, yeah, this is how we are. And she said, no, is this really how your parents are all the time? Like, do they not scream at each other? Are there not tears? Is that, is there not fighting going on all the time? And I was like, no, my parents never do that. And she was shocked. She was really shocked that everybody's parents weren't like that. I think she was growing up thinking, this is the dynamic in my household, therefore it is the dynamic in all households. And I think that's what ends up happening is that we see how our parents deal with things, how they handle a situation. We don't know any different, so we then handle it in exactly the same way, right? And they've learned that behavior from their parents, right? And it just keeps going back and back. Yeah.
And go ahead, Tracy.
Oh, I was just going to say, and I don't think we're even aware that we're learning this. It's just one day something comes to us and we go, oh no, this is my belief on that. And it's just been years and years of hearing it in the house or whatever it is. And like the money one is a big one that our generation grew up a certain way with money. And it was just like, this is what you do with your money. This is how it is. You can never go this far, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
It's funny that you bring that up because it's when we were talking about this a little bit beforehand, I was like, like I had to think for a moment and then I didn't. Like things just came right to my mind. And one of them was my move here to Wisconsin. So my parents did relocate to Florida probably 35 years ago, which was, leaving the family, like all the cousins, the families and the whole thing. But that had to deal with my mom's illness. She had severe rheumatoid arthritis and couldn't be in New England any longer. She needed drier weather. But they went down, they were going to go either to a new place where there was no family or Florida where there was family. Of course, they went to Florida because there was family. And I could understand that. But my company closed in Connecticut and I was offered a position out here in Wisconsin. And my family was like, my mom and my stepdad were like, well, just come down to Florida. Come down where family is. And I was like, well, why? Like they couldn't understand why I would think of coming to Florida, like think of moving to Wisconsin. No, stay where the family is. My kids were grown, so I didn't have them for the reason to be out here, to stop here. Well, then the only next logical place to move to was Florida, not the other states that we have here. It was either Connecticut or Florida. Those were the only two places I could live to be around family. And I broke the mold and I moved to Wisconsin. And I'm glad I did. But it's still that thought process of all the way down.
Mhm.
My brother did not do that. He stayed in his area. I moved on. And I think my challenge was I want my children to not follow my footsteps. I don't want my children to follow my footsteps. I want them to forge their own footsteps in life. And when you talk, Tracy, about the argument, I grew up in a household that was always arguing. There was always an argument going on, always. It was Republican, Democrat. It was Yankees, Red Sox. There was always an argument all the time. Sorry, my little princess has come in to say hi to me. And there was always this argument going on. And one day my mother said to me, "Why are you nice?" And I looked at her and I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "You don't argue." And I said, "Because I made a choice not to argue. I made a choice to be nice." And she's like, "That's a choice?" Because there's always been an argument.
Yeah. And probably the same for that's how what she saw as well at home, right?
Mhm.
Like the arguments that pursue. It's like, and it literally is the way some people behave. Like, I have a friend who is very wonderful guy, really wonderful person, but very self-centered in his thinking, right? He tends to be, that does what he wants. And he's got a family, but he does what he wants. He, goes out when he wants, he buys what he wants without there kind of being any kind of conflict. And I'm talking about big ticket items, like he'll go out and buy a car or whatever, right? And it's really interesting because that's exactly what his dad was like.
Mhm.
His dad did exactly the same thing, right? And it's like, he's now got kids, and I'm thinking, I'm wondering if the kids are sitting there going, well, that's what you do. You don't need to talk to anybody about
No.
what it is that you want. You just go do it, right? And damn the consequences or whatever, right? Like somebody else's opinion in that situation doesn't matter. And it's just so interesting to watch that kind of stuff happen. And I think it's also an incredible opportunity to take a look at our own lives and to go, what is it that I am currently holding on to, or what is it that I currently believe that's potentially limiting myself? That is a generational thing, that I am thinking this simply because that's the way my parents thought, and that's the way my grandparents thought, and the people before them. Like,
But how do you come to that realization? So that's my question, is how do you come to that realization, like, there might be a way to change this, or there might be a reason to change this? Like you talk about your friend with the purchasing of the items. How does that person one day say, maybe this isn't the way you should be purchasing something? Like, how do you come to that type of a realization to change?
It may not be their realization. It may be somebody else saying, why do you never say, hey, listen, I'm going to go out and buy a car. Do you want some input on that, since you're going to be driving it, or you're going to be sharing it with me, or whatever, if they're in a relationship, right? I mean, if you're not in a relationship and you're all by yourself, then sure, go ahead and do whatever you want. But
Right.
but this dynamic isn't that, right? So it could be that somebody else comes to them and says, something, or they overhear a conversation, or they just simply decide to become more self-aware. Like for me, the whole thing that I started thinking about what other patterns do I have that are simply dictated because that's how I was brought up, was the money thing.
Right.
I sat down and was like, what are my money beliefs? And I was asked that by my coach, like, what is it that you think about money? And I started to write out all these things that I thought about money. And I was looking at this going, oh my God, I can hear my dad talk to me right now. This is exactly what my dad would say about money, right? And not that it was necessarily bad, but it was limiting. It was very confined, like it's time equals money, right? It's like, so whatever time it is that you put into something, that's what you're going to get back. So it's the dollar on the hour that makes the difference, not your value of what you're offering that's making the difference, right?
Right.
So it was really interesting. And after I went through that exercise, I actually sat there and thought, what else do I have in my life? What other beliefs do I have in my life, good or bad, that are simply a generational thing? It's what it's what I could see in my grandparents, because I was fortunate enough to, be around, or my grandparents were around when I was growing up. So I was able to, mix with them and see what their beliefs were and see how they handle things. And as a reflection of that, saw how my parents handle things. And it's like, there's a lot of crossover into my life of how I do things. Like people will often say, oh, you're just like your dad.
I was
Right?
just gonna say that when
Yeah.
I do something or say something and my mother comes into my brain, I've started to do that where, is that a good thing or a bad thing? And not to put my mom down, but a perfect example. My mom walked to the grocery store. It was produce first. We went to the meat aisle. You went to this, and then you went up and down. I walk into a grocery store. It is produce first and this. And then one day I went, wonder what happened if I went the other way.
And your
guess
brain
what?
probably went, wow, what are you doing?
And I still ended up with the groceries and I still ended up with everything. So it's just funny. Sorry, I gotta let
And
somebody
these are little things that we're talking about. But if you think about it in terms of how you witnessed your parents interact, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, how do I do that? How is it that my parents, I can see my parents in the grandparents because of the relationships and how they handled problems and whatever. I mean, I can see my parents broke a lot of that generational thing about dealing with problems, because my grandparents would just go off into separate corners and not talk.
But that was also the generation, right?
It was, but it's because that's all they knew how to do.
Yeah.
Right. So my parents, thankfully, were like, it doesn't have to be that way. Let's not do that. Right. And it's like, that's breaking that generational chain of, it's just, we just keep passing it on, passing it on, passing it on, passing it on.
So one of the things that I try to do is, someone says, why do you do that? And I say, that's how I was brought up, taught. That's what my parents did. I personally tried within myself to ask, but is that where I want to be now?
It takes a lot of self-awareness, I think, to be able to do that, though. It's
I like your face, Tracy. Well,
it does. Are people asking these questions? I think sometimes it happens when an event or you're in a certain scenario, and then you question, why am I making this choice? And it's like, oh, this is what my parents would have done, or this is how it would be. But I don't know how many people are actually looking when they're making choices at where is this coming from?
Oh, I would suggest most people don't. Most people just keep doing the same, which is why I'm saying the generational mistakes. I mean, I'm calling them mistakes, but generational ways of behaving and thinking about things that don't necessarily serve us, unless you decide to become self-aware, unless you decide to take a moment to go, do I want to, is this the choice I want to make? Or can I make something different? Can I take a different pathway here? it's just going to keep going, right? Because until somebody finally says, wait a minute, right? Just like my parents decided that they weren't going to handle marital problems the way my grandparents handled marital problems, right? They went, there's a difference here. I can do this differently. And I think it's the same for all of us. We have an opportunity to take a look at the stuff that we do kind of on autopilot that we don't even think about. It's like we just do because, like Michelle said, I've always done it this way. It's the way I think, right? And we don't ever question it. It's like, well, why not? Why not question it? Maybe it serves you and it's great and you can keep it and it's totally okay. But maybe there's some stuff there that you're like, you know what? I don't want to think about money the way I think about it. I'm gonna change that. You know?
You guys keep talking. I'll be right back.
And looking at your children too, because then they do something, you go, oh, you just did something that I would do, and I don't like that about myself.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like whether it be a money thing or I don't know. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but where I see my kids doing certain things and I go, you've got that from me. And maybe I should be more aware of what I'm doing. Well, now they're growing, so the damage is done.
No, it isn't though. That's the thing. It's like they get a chance to go, I'm not going to do that, right?
Yeah.
You know, like, I mean, I look at my daughter and there's so many things that I'm like, oh God, like Megs, change that now, you know, it's like, but I picked it up from my mom, like cleaning, right? Like the way I clean a house, like I'm just so obsessed, right? It's like not in a good way. And my daughter has seen that. And so she thinks that's the way you clean the house, right? It's like, Megs, give yourself a break. Trust me, give yourself a break. So it's little things like that. Or how often have you thought, as you've been, you know, as you've been, you know, trying to teach your kids something, or you're upset with them and you've said something and you're like, oh my God, I just sound exactly like my mother.
Yeah.
Or I sound exactly like my father, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Those are the moments that are like, you know, to think afterwards, geez, I want, like, is this a good way to do this, or should maybe there be a different way, you know?
Well, I think right now too, there's a lot of looking inside yourself right now. I don't know. I think with COVID and everything, people started looking at what they were doing with their lives and stuff like that. So I do think there is questions being asked about that. I don't know if people are actually really taking it to the next step and going, I'm going to make these changes because that, like you said, didn't serve me. So why am I doing it now? Why am I taking on, you know, and your generations ago, what are they being taught? They weren't as aware of what was going on as we are now, right?
Yeah, and their awareness was totally different. I mean, it was survival, right? It wasn't, they didn't have what we have available to us now. But I do agree with you. I do think that there is more and more people who are more interested in these kinds of conversations that we have. And I think as a result of that, I mean, that's why our channel gets listened to and people decide, you know, they want to listen to podcasts that, you know, are, you know, helping people with different things in their life and relationships and money. And I mean, virtually there isn't a podcast out there that doesn't cover some kind of topic that you can pick up on. So I do really think people are more in tune with taking that self-awareness to a different level.
Yeah, and becoming just a better person, and that you have this these tools and resources at your fingertips to help you become a better person. Yeah,
absolutely.
I'm sorry about that. That's people. Okay. My little princess needed an outside little pee, and it's only been here a month, and so we're still getting to know each other. And so she hits my hand a couple times, but so generational, I like that you didn't, it's not really mistakes, it's just generational thinking, behaviors, or whatever on that. What we would love to hear what are some of those behaviors that you've seen that you're thinking of changing or don't know how to change, or that you have changed, that you have seen? So I think sometimes we hear the saying, I don't want to be like my parents. And sometimes we take that as a negative. And I think it's okay to not be like your parents. It is okay to forge your own way. So how are you not like your parents? Love to hear that in the comments. I'm not putting down, I don't want you putting down your parents. I just want to know how you're not like your parents. And if you have a further question about that, put it in here, and we can also revisit this in a later episode. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button.
Thanks for watching, and we hope to see you as a regular member of our community.